So, hello everyone. Uh, this is the second topic in continuation with the dermatological therapy. The earlier class we spoke about topical treatments that are used in dermatology. Today I'll be speaking about, in this class, I'll be speaking about systems that are available in that we call dermatology. There are many, but few important drugs which are commonly used in. So I'll be covering this topic under these headings. The major drugs that we'll be discussing today are sulfones, antihistamines, systemic steroids, antibacterial agents, antifungal drugs, antiviral drugs, antiparasitic agents, malarials, drugs used, and also we'll speak about drugs can be used during pregnancy and lactation, and we'll end this class. So the current dermatology is well equipped with array of therapeutic tools for the successful management of various dermatoses. We all know that the diagnosis is apart from clinical, we also use certain diagnostic tools, and finally we make a diagnosis far better with the help of various tools. A better understanding of the disease is always important, and also we can prescribe the right medications get the maximum benefit and least side effect. Drug interaction is something which is very well known, and resistance is the other problem, and side effects. These are the challenges that we face when we treat the patient. Commonly used systemic agents in the dermatological disorders are those which we commonly see, such as psoriasis, lichen planus, vitiligo. Many such common disorders I'll be just briefing while telling about the systemic drugs. So let's start with something which we have been using for a really long time in dermatology, that is Dapsone. Dapsone is something which we use in Hansen's, and we also use in various dermatological conditions. It's available as 100 milligram tablet. It's usually available in a box. It's not available as a strip. But actually, it's available in a box container if you go to the pharmacy. But when we are giving it in a blister package, where we give it in a fixed dose packing in multi-drug therapy regimen in Hansen's, it comes in a blister pack. So the dose is 100 mg per day. Commonly we use in Hansen's, that is leprosy. Then we use in certain dermatological disorders where it's used as a primary first line indication is dermatitis herpetiformis, erythema elevatum, diutinum. But there are many indications, especially where there are a lot of neutrophil infiltrate such disorders. We use Dapsone. One is bullous eruptions of SLE, and we use in linear IgA disease, bullous pemphigoid, pyoderma gangrenosum, and also in acne conglobata. So there are certain other indications of Dapsone, not only Hansen, but we use various. It's a very useful drug. It's very useful, and it's can be used in various conditions in dermatology. You should, but most of the times patients when they start taking, they get scared thinking that it's given only for the Hansens. This thing you should be clear that it's not only given in Hansen, it's given in various other disorders of skin. What are the side effects of this, adverse effects of this Dapsone? You must be knowing this. It can cause hemolytic anemia and methemoglobinemia, and common side effects such as gastric irritation, nausea, anorexia, hepatitis will be there, but the most serious ones are hepatitis and cholestatic jaundice. Headache, fatigue, and psychosis is known to occur, and sometimes the reaction will be more severe in the form of morbilliform eruptions, EMF, that is erythema multiforme, even STS and TN can happen with Dapsone. In the blood parameters, apart from hemolytic anemia and methemoglobinemia, leukopenia and agranulocytosis can also be seen, and very rarely it can also present as peripheral neuropathy, and which is always motor. This is the one which you should not confuse with the neuropathy which is always also there in Hansen. So peripheral neuropathy, which is only motor, always motor, is Dapsone. So these are certain side effects which we have. Then we have antihistamines, which is the most common used medication we can say, because this is the one which we use for various conditions, or most of the conditions where the itches, we see itch as one of the complaints. So histamine receptors, we know there are 4 receptors, that is H1, H2, H3, H4, H1 receptors are those which are responsible for vasodilation of small vessels, smooth muscle contraction, and itching. H2 receptors are those which are responsible for gastric acid production. H3 is located in brain and responsible for histamine production and release, whereas H4 receptors are immune active cells. They're in eosinophils and neutrophils and in GAT and in CNS. So we are mainly concerned with H1 receptors, which we commonly use, the H1 blockers. Traditionally, we divide it as first generation and second and third generation. Basically, the classical ones, traditional first generation, whereas the dose rating ones are second and third generation. The sedation is the biggest adverse effect of this antihistamines, H1 antihistamines, but the newer antihistamines which are available are usually safe and least sedative. The commonly used ones are first generation one which we used to use. There is hydroxyzine, chlorpheniramine. These are those which cross the blood-brain barrier and cause a lot of sedation. Some even cross placenta, while some doesn't. They do not cross placenta. So basically, this is that which are safe in pregnancy and which are not. Desloratadine, and there are certain group of antihistamines which we should consider in certain disorders, such as in renal disease patients, what antihistamines you want like to give. In hepatic disease patients, hepatic patients, patients with hepatic abnormalities, what antihistamines you would like to give. This you should remember. For example, in renal disease patients, it's always better to use desloratadine, whereas in hepatic patients, it's safe to use cetirizine, hexafenadine, and desloratadine. So overall, if you see, desloratadine is a safer antihistamine to be used in most of the patients. So then we have, that's what we have discussed. First generation antihistamines are chlorpheniramine maleate and hydroxyzine. Commonly we call it as chlorpheniramine maleate. It's available as 25 and 50 milligram, and hydroxyzine is available as 10 to 25 milligram. These are very sedative drugs, but they give excellent response when it compares to reducing the itching. Second and third generation ones are the least sedative. Example are cetirizine, levocetirizine, loratadine, desloratadine, and fexofenadine. Out of this, fexofenadine is least sedative, and cetirizine is slightly sedative, even though it comes in second generation. Mechanism of action, we all know it acts by competitive inhibition of actions of histamine by receptor blockade, thereby reducing the histamine mediated thereby reducing histamine-mediated pruritus. Thus, drug also prevent vasodilatation, transfusion, and formation of typical wheals on the vascular endothelial surface. This is what happens in urticaria, you all know. That is, it causes vasodilatation, release of exudate, and thereby we see wheals on the skin surface with intense itching and burning sensation. The whole component of this pathophysiology is blocked by histamines. So we use this antihistamines in various causes of pruritus, urticaria, and edema. Side effect, as we discussed till now, sedation is the most important side effect, and impaired concentration are the things which we should keep in mind. We can't give this antihistamines without any elderly. We have to be very careful while giving first generation antihistamine, especially who are doing fine motor work, driving. You should always avoid first generation. Anticholinergic effects such as mucosal dryness, urinary retention, and precipitation of glaucoma should be kept in mind. Because these are the contraindications on like group of people whom we should always be careful while giving first generation antihistamines. So what are the precautions to be taken? As we discussed, one should always observe caution while using antihistamines in hepatic disease, epilepsy, benign prostatic hyperplasia, and glaucoma. Loratadine is currently as a safe drug to use in pregnancy and lactation, whereas CPM and diphenhydramine is considered safe in pregnancy.
So the next group of drugs that we'll be discussing is systemic steroids. We have discussed in detail regarding the topical steroids in previous class. So in this class, we'll talk about systemic steroids. Systemic steroids are used for their anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive effects. So most of the inflammatory conditions and autoimmune disorders, we use systemic steroids. Most of the condition we use low dose steroid for a short period of time, except few conditions where you have to use higher dose of steroid, especially in certain drug reactions, pemphigus group of disorders. Otherwise, in most of the conditions we use low dose steroid. Mechanism of action remains the same. At the cellular level, the steroids pass diffusely through the cell membrane and they bind to intracytoplasmic soluble proteins receptor to form a complex. And this complex enters the nucleus and then regulates the transcription of number of genes, which leads to decreased synthesis of pro-inflammatory molecules such as interleukins, cytokines, and protease. Ideally, the end result is decreased release of pro-inflammatory molecules. Synthesis of lipoprotein increases, reduces the phospholipase A2 activity, it reduces the concentration of prostaglandins and leukotrienes, and they reduce the number of monocytes, lymphocytes, and eosinophils, whereas they increase the number of neutrophils. They modify cellular activation, proliferation, and differentiation. At the end of the thing, immunity is suppressed and the pro-inflammatory cytokines are decreased. So where do we use long-term systemic steroids? Are used in pemphigus, bullous pemphigoid, SLE, dermatomyositis, eosinophilic fasciitis, vasculitis, neutrophilic dermatosis, and in reaction, lepra reaction. Whereas the short-term schedule is usually used in acute exacerbation of certain conditions such as atopic dermatitis, acute or disseminated eczema, of very etiology. Also in TEN, that is toxic epidermal necrolysis, erythema nodosum leprosum, or erythema multiforme (EMF), and exfoliative dermatitis, lichen planus, and DLE, we use short term. But otherwise, in most of the time, we use in reactions, we use long-term schedule. In exacerbation of certain conditions, we use short-term schedule. Some of the conditions we use short-term schedule even if it is not considered to be an exacerbation of conditions such as TEN, lichen planus, SLE, not SLE, DLE. In SLE we use it for long time duration, but in DLE we use it for short-term duration. So which steroid to use? Usually we use this prednisolone. That is, if you are to compare prednisolone with other steroids, it's equally prednisolone 5 mg is equals to methylprednisolone of a dose of 4 mg. Triamcinolone of 4 mg, deflazacort 6 mg, betamethasone or dexamethasone is 0.75 mg, and hydrocortisone 20 mg. So we can make out that in this chart that dexamethasone and betamethasone are a bit stronger variant, which with just 0.75 milligram of betamethasone or dexamethasone, we get equivalent of 5 milligram of prednisolone. You should remember this dosing so that you can decide on what steroid to use at what dosage, because most of the time what we discuss is in terms of prednisolone. So most of the time we tell about 1 milligram per kg of prednisolone, but if you have an option to use the other steroid, you can always use this chart to calculate the appropriate dose. So what are the side effects? The side effects of oral corticosteroids adverse effects vary and they depend on type of steroid used, the duration of the steroid used, and patient factors also. Low dose administration over a longer duration is more likely to precipitate side effects than a high dose over a short period. This is something which you should remember. Even if you give a very high dose for a period of 7 days, 10 days, that doesn't cause much side effect, but instead if you give a 10 milligram or 20 milligram very low dose for a period of 2 months, 3 months, or 4 months, then it's more likely to cause HPA axis suppression and leading to Cushingoid features. If you want to see from head to toe order of side effects, it's usually raised intracranial tension, psychosis, glaucoma, premature cataract, Cushingoid features, activation of the infection such as pulmonary tuberculosis, hypertension. gastritis, gastric perforation, pancreatitis, worsening of diabetes, osteoporosis, premature closure of epiphysis, avascular necrosis, or fever. These are some of the common side effects of giving oral steroids for a very long time. And calcium and vitamin D supplementation will be very essential, especially if you are giving in a postmenopausal woman or in an elderly patient. So, are there any drug interaction with steroids? Yes, steroids increase the metabolism of barbiturates, phenytoin, rifampicin, salicylates, antihypertensive, anti-diabetic drugs, and increase their dosage during the concomitant therapy. So, there is increase in their dosage is essential during when you give the steroids along with these drugs. Remember the drugs; they are mainly anticonvulsants such as barbiturates and phenytoin. And antibiotics we have rifampicin, salicylates, and antihypertensives and anti-diabetic drugs. Then we have the antibacterial agents which are used in oral forms. The commonly we use is amongst penicillin group of drugs are commonly used in skin and its infections. Penicillin still the drug of choice for most of the gram-positive cocci. Anti-staphylococcal penicillin such as oxacillin, dicloxacillin, flucloxacillin, nafcillin are commonly used. Acute sight-threatening there can be certain reactions to these drugs like any other drug, but you have to be careful. In severe infection, we always use injectable form. But most of the time for minor infections, we use either topical or if at all we have to use something oral, we use common drugs such as some cloxacillin group staphylococcal infection. Other penicillins that are used are aminopenicillins, that is ampicillin. Then we use rarely we use carboxypenicillins and other beta-lactam group of drugs such as monobactams, astronam, and carbapenems. These are rarely used. We don't use much. Cephalosporins are used. Yes, these are broad spectrum antibiotics and are best used as a second line of drugs. So we have different cephalosporins. Out of this, what you have to remember in skin is, with regard to skin, most commonly what we use is ceftriaxone. Ceftriaxone is used as 0.5 to 1 gram BD orally, which is a first generation, easily available, and it is safe and can be used for most of the skin infections. We also use cefuroxime, 1.5 gram 6 to 8 hour IV, that is in as a second line drugs, and cefixime, which is 400 milligram BD orally, is also used in most of the skin infection. But most of the time it is penicillin group of drugs, and then we as a second line we use this cephalosporin. Among aminoglycosides, we use amikacin and gentamicin. But they have to be very careful before going because of their outer toxicity and nephrotoxicity. Whenever you suspect some gram-negative infection, it's better to add an amikacin or to your treatment. Tetracyclines are very commonly used. I think dermatologists use tetracyclines a lot, especially the doxycycline and minocyclines are very commonly used in acne. Based on their half-lives, we classify short-acting such as tetracycline, intermediate such as dimethylcycline and metacycline, which are not easily available. Long-acting ones are doxycycline and minocycline. Doxycycline we give 200 mg loading dose followed by 100 mg per day, whereas minocycline we give again the same dose, but because of the side effect profile and safety profile, we generally tend to give low dose of minocycline. Precautions that should be taken for tetracycline group of drugs. It should be avoided in pregnancy, lactation, and less than 8 years of age, as it causes teeth anomalies and skeletal growth depression in fetus. Whereas tetracycline should not be, also to be careful, it should not be given along with food and antacids, milk, or iron containing compounds. It can cause a lot of gastritis, so better to give an antacid an hour or two before the administration of tetracycline. There are certain macrolides and lincosamides which are used. Common one are azithromycin and clarithromycin. Clindamycin is another group of drugs which are used, but more commonly used topical rather than oral. Azithromycin is usually given as 500 mg orally before food for 24 hours hourly, that is a single dose per day. whereas erythromycin is given at a dose of 250 to 500 milligram orally 6th-hourly. It can cause gastritis, and certain drugs of glucosamides may cause diarrhea also. 10% of the patient may suffer from pseudomembranous colitis, especially in clindamycin. So these are azithromycin is the only one commonly among this. Then we have quinolones. Quinolones are those group of antibiotics which contains drugs such as norfloxacin, ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin, moxifloxacin, and they are very useful, and they are used in dermatology is mainly limited most commonly to Pseudomonas group of infections, and otherwise in STDs such as we use quinolones in sexually transmitted infections and also in leprosy as one of the second line drugs. So GI disturbances are more frequent than CNS and phototoxic adversities, which have been mentioned with its safety. Regarding the oral antifungal drugs, we use a lot of topicals, but also we use oral antifungal drugs in extensive cases, especially extensive superficial fungal infection. Whenever it fails to respond to topical therapy, or there is a recurrence, or whenever there is involvement of hair and nail, it's always systemic. Systemic drug has to be introduced, and poor compliance with regard to topical complication in some of the patients lead us to use of systemic antifungal drugs. And also in immunocompromised states, we usually use antifungal drugs. What are the systemic antifungal drugs? Azoles are the commonly used ones: ketoconazole, mefenoconazole, or itraconazole, fluconazole, voriconazole, and posaconazole. Nowadays, we are using more of itraconazole. Earlier, we used to use a lot of fluconazole, but more of itraconazole because of the changing drug profile, resistance, changing drug sensitivity, changing resistance. Of late, we are using itraconazole more commonly. So mechanism of action is by inhibiting 14-alpha demethylation, affecting ergosterol synthesis in the cell membrane. Drug interactions are more with this group because of the involvement of system. So there are certain side effects which are seen with these drugs. Ketoconazole, for example, it's used in candidiasis, pityriasis versicolor, and dermatophytosis. But hepatotoxicity, gynecomastia, and menstrual irregularities are common, and we are not much used ketoconazole nowadays, especially because of its drug interaction. Fluconazole is commonly used, especially we use in 150 milligram per week for tinea infections. Pityriasis versicolor, we give 400 milligram single day dose, or in candidiasis, we give 100 to 200 milligram daily. Is comparatively safer drug. Itraconazole also is given in the same indications, but also it can given in deeper fungal infections and in onychomycosis. Certain infections such as extensive bacterial, mycetoma, and onychomycosis. Continuing with the systemic antifungals, we have allylamines, which is terbinafine, which is highly effective against dermatophytosis. It acts by inhibiting squalene epoxidase, resulting in accumulation of squalene and ergosterol. This is also used in dermatophytosis, such as tinea infections. But when it comes to pityriasis versicolor and candida, only the topical form is effective, not the systemic form, and also used in sporotrichosis and chromomycosis. The dosing is in tinea, we usually use as 250 milligram per day for 1 to 2 weeks. Whereas when it comes to fingernail and toenail infection, we increase the period to 6 weeks and 12 weeks respectively. What are the side effects? Rarely seen for when you're giving for 1 to 2 weeks. These are headache, GI symptoms, and skin rash. But there can be certain drug interaction when you're giving with rifampicin and warfarin. Polyenes are systemic antifungals, which are they are macrolides derived from Streptomyces species, amphotericin B, nystatin, and natamycin. They bind to cell membrane leakage. Amphotericin B is used in systemic mycosis such as candidiasis and aspergillosis. It's available in 4 parenteral form, that is amphotericin B deoxycholate, liposomal amphotericin B, amphotericin B lipid complex, and amphotericin colloidal dispersion. Side effects is nephrotoxicity, which is countered to a certain extent by tagging liposomes to the drug. Griseofulvin is the one which is derived from Penicillium griseofulvum. It's an excellent drug which has been used for a very long time, and we still use for tinea capitis. But more, it's a fungistatic drug, acts by inhibition of intercellular microtubules, so inhibition of the formation of mitotic spindles. The defective fungal elements dehydrate and curl, hence the griseofulvin is also called as curling factor. It's known to inhibit leukocyte movement and as an anti-inflammatory also. The dosage is 6 to 8 milligram per kg per day in 2 to divided dose, oral dose. Also, if it is in micronized form, we use a 10 to 12 milligram per kg per day. Nausea, gastritis, intolerable headache, photosensitivity, and antibutyl effect and like effects with alcohol. Drug interaction with phenytoin and phenobarbital are well known. Coming to antiviral drugs, there are, as I discussed during the last class, we don't use topical antivirals, but most of the conditions what we use is systemic antivirals. So you should know about systemic antivirals in detail. These are used for many viral conditions, especially herpes group of infections. And the principle here is most of the times we have to use antiviral drugs as soon as possible, especially it has to be within 72 hours of skin. So acyclovir is commonly used one. It is a synthetic purine analog. Can be given in various forms. It's converted by thymidine kinase to acyclovir triphosphate, which subsequently inhibits the viral DNA polymerase. Commonly used oral acyclovir is to treat herpes simplex and zoster infection, that is varicella zoster. Intravenous is used in fulminant infection, and especially when there is CN in immunocompromised individuals. Dosage schedule of antivirals is herpes simplex primary you give acyclovir at 200 mg 5 times daily, whereas in recurrent cases you give 400 mg 3 times daily for 5 days, whereas in suppressive dose 400 milligram twice daily, and herpes zoster you give 800 milligram 5 times a day for 7 days. Remember the dose of acyclovir, which is in herpes simplex group of disorders it's different, and herpes zoster it's different. In herpes simplex it is, in primary case you give 200 milligram 5 times daily, whereas in recurrent case 400 milligram 3 times daily. The time duration is different. In primary you give it for a period of 7 to 10 days, whereas in recurrence you give it for a period of 5 days. Whereas in herpes zoster you give 800 milligram 5 times a day for 7 days. And there are certain other groups, drugs such as valacyclovir and famciclovir, which are more compliant because the dosing is less frequent. Because here, when the dosing is 5 times a day, most likely that the patient will miss a dose. So you can consider giving valacyclovir and famciclovir instead. Antiparasitic drugs, the commonly used ones are ivermectin, thiabendazole, albendazole. So ivermectin originally approved for strongyloidiasis and onchocerciasis. This drug is often used in treatment of scabies and pediculosis capitis. A single dose of 200 microgram per kg per day is given. Per kg is advocated on an empty stomach. It blocks glutamate-gated chloride ion channels, causing neuromuscular paralysis of the parasite. And so it is given in a stat dose of 200 microgram per kg, then it is repeated after 1 week. Thiabendazole is again an antihelminthic, acts by inhibition of enzyme fumarate reductase. It's used in larva migrans and currents, 1.5 gram per day for 2 days. The other group of drugs that we use is retinoids, which we had discussed in the previous class regarding the topical retinoids, tretinoin and adapalene. Whereas in systemic retinoids, we have usually what we use is isotretinoin and acitretin. FDA approved indications of these retinoids is severe acne, that is isotretinoin use, severe psoriasis, that is acitretin is used, cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, Bexar. Dosing isotretinoin is used in nodulocytic acne at the dose of 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg per day for a period of 3 to 4 weeks. Acitretin is used in severe psoriasis at the same dose of 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg per day for 6 weeks. How does retinoid act? The mechanism of action of retinoid includes synthetic and natural compounds that have activity similar to vitamin A. These are at the cellular level, they are the cytosolic retinoid binding protein transfers it to the nucleus. Then retinoids activate the nuclear receptor to regulate certain gene transcription. include cellular differentiation, anti-inflammatory effect, anti-proliferative effect. In the skin, they have anti-keratinizing effect. That's why we use it in psoriasis. And in sebaceous gland, they reduce sebum production and decrease maturation of sebocytes. That's what we want in acne. We have to reduce the sebum production and decrease the maturation of. So it's used in nodular cystic acne. Off-label use include rosacea, hidradenitis suppurativa, Darius disease, keratoderma. Dosages we just discussed. Acid rating is available as 25 and 75 milligram, 50 milligram capsule. So they are chosen accordingly for psoriasis, and more commonly we use them in type of psoriasis. It can be combined with PUA, what we call it as 3-PUA. Isotretinoin is the one which is used in acne. Or we use a smaller dose initially as 20 milligram per day, then we can increase it to 30 and 40 and up to 60. Coming to other immunosuppressive drugs such as methotrexate, another drug which we commonly use, especially in psoriasis. It can be taken orally, IV or IM. Oral dose commonly used is 2.5 to 15 milligram per kg per week. 15 milligram per week, it's a full dose, 2.5 to 15 milligram per week in a single dose. Side effect is it can cause hepatotoxicity, pneumonitis, lot of gastritis, diffuse interstitial fibrosis, pancytopenia. It's a potent teratogen and abortifacient, so you should be very careful in females when you're giving this drug. It can do cause some toxicity when you're giving a high dose. Most of the time what happens, this is a weekly drug. If you fail to do a proper counseling or give a right advice to the patient, they may start taking it daily and end up in methotrexate toxicity. So you have to be careful. So there are certain guidelines which has been issued to take care of this. Always monitor hemogram, LFT and ultrasound scan of the liver has to be done regularly. Test to be done 1 to 4 week and later regularly every third month. Baseline we usually don't do it, and you can if you are putting it for a short course. Azathioprine is the other drug which is derived from 6-mercaptopurine and considered a safe immunosuppressant because of its infrequent toxicity, used for its both immunosuppressive and anti-inflammatory effects. Commonest indication is pemphigus vulgaris, other indications being vasculitis, neutrophilic dermatosis, connective tissue disorders, and recalcitrant photodermatosis. Before giving azathioprine, ideally you are supposed to do TPMT test, that is thiopurine methyl transferate levels. If it is less than 5 units, it is better to avoid azathioprine. Dosage is 0.5 to 2.5 milligram per kg per day, while commonly used ones are 50 to 100 milligram per day. It's available as 50 mg tablets, so you can you start with 50 milligram and then later increase it to 100 milligram per day. Side effects include pancytopenia, precipitation of infections, and drug hypersensitivity syndromes. A TPMT assay prior to starting therapy is always to be careful. Cyclosporin A acts by decreasing T cell and keratinocyte proliferation. It also reduces levels of interleukins and TNF, that is tumor necrosis factor. It is used in widespread erythrodermic or pustular psoriasis. It's a rapid cool down of inflammatory component in florid psoriasis. It gives an immediate result, not like methotrexate or retinoids. Cyclosporin usually gives immediate benefit in psoriasis. So in a very aggressive psoriasis, severe psoriasis, we use this drug. Also in atopic dermatitis, urticaria, recalcitrant urticaria, and pyoderma gangrenosum. Dosage is 3 to 5 milligram per kg per day. Side effects include renal dysfunction, hypertension, tremors, dysphagia, and gingival hyperplasia. HCQS, which is nowadays in news, we are using it in dermatology for a long time, especially in connective tissue diseases and photodermatosis. Metabolized in liver, only 15 to 20% of total clearance is through kidney. Here, this drug, and usual dosage is 400 milligram per day. It has a photoprotective effect, hence we use it in photodermatosis. Anti-inflammatory effect, as it decreases the T cell release of interleukins such as 1 and 6 and tumor necrosis factor and interferon gamma. now. So we use it in SLE, DLE, and also in porphyric cutaneous tartar. We use this. So we spoke about different type of oral drugs that we have used, but when it comes to pregnancy and lactation, you have to be very careful, especially using certain drugs. You have to be you have to choose the right drug. When it comes to antihistaminics, always be safe and use diphenhydramine or CPM, that is chlorpheniramine, if it is in pregnancy, and avoid first generation hydroxyl and also the fexofenadine. They usually suppresses the lactation and can cause certain irritability in kids when given during the period of lactation. Systemic steroids, it's better to be avoided, especially in the first trimester. Short-term therapy can always be given in the trimester. Then antibacterial agents, safe is macrolides, penicillins, and cephalosporins. Avoid quinolones and tetracyclines. Antifungal drugs, preferably give fluconazole, which is safe. Avoid terbinafine. Terbinafine is another drug which is category B, but lactation it is not advised. So usually in pregnancy, terbinafine or fluconazole should be a good choice. Antiviral drugs, it is systemic antiviral drugs are all safe in all trimesters, but you have to always choose safely by looking at the ratio. Antiparasitic drug, topical antipsychotics are safe, but large dose of linden is not advised in pregnancy. Oral antiparasitic drugs better to be avoided. Retinoids are a big no, should never be given in pregnancy anytime during the and effect of drugs with respect to trimester of pregnancy and lactation is before conception. If you are using contraception failure can occur, especially the use of azathioprine, methotrexate, NSAIDs, cresophyllin, itraconazole, tetracycline, and rifampicin. So you have to be careful. In first trimester, drugs at this stage affect the cell equally, can cause certain spontaneous abortions. Hence, FDA category X and D drugs should be completely avoided, such as methotrexate, finasteride, retinoids, thalidomide, colchicine, spironolactone, cresophyllin, and cyclophosphamide. These were something the points with regard to pregnancy and lactation. You have to be careful while using the drugs in this group of patients. Go through all the systemic drugs that have been discussed. If there is any doubts, you can always contact me through my mail ID drshricharith@gmail.com, or you can meet me in the clinics. So yeah, I'll post the MCQs along with this chapter. Okay, all the best. Bye.